Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
Adam Knapp, President and CEO of BRAC, the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Adam Knapp, President and CEO of BRAC, that's the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, is our guest. Buddy, I think this is the 3rd time you've been on the television show?
That's awesome, man. It kicked me off yet. That's great.
It's pretty good. I think you've been on the radio show now. You're the league leader at 6 appearances
Come
or
on,
something.
Man.
So
I love
it's
it.
Pretty good. I appreciate your time.
Let's keep stats.
We do, obviously. Remind our viewers about BRAC's mission. It's not your typical Chamber of Commerce. Does some things a little bit differently, more focused on economic development.
Yeah, we blew up our organization, our board did, before I got here back in 2005, and said we want to create a regional organization whose mission is to lead economic development in the 9-parish area. And that effort has led to kind of a sea change of how we think about the work that we do. And really the purpose, much like in a company, you're trying to think about what creates value, what creates returns. We're trying to do the same thing at a regional level, is to build a nonprofit focused on performance and returns. We write 5-year plans to govern the work that we do that's driven by the business community to try to think about driving economic growth.
You've been lucky, and I've had the opportunity to watch it relatively closely, but you are blessed with an exceptionally talented young staff. Talk about your team a little bit and their effort and their work.
You know, every organization is really made up of who they are. I mean, their success is driven by the people around them, and we are fortunate to be able to have the ability to bring in the team we have. What I mentioned a minute ago about blowing up the organization, a lot of it 10 years ago, 12 years ago when that happened, was a need to have a better and a larger team that are focused on the skill areas that they need to be capable of. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to pay well and recruit well, and then build an organization that's an engaging place in which to work. I think we're also fortunate that when we have had vacancies, we've been able to recruit great talent in those slots. And we're always, trying to think about, competitiveness of the organization, but we're also trying to think about a great culture internally for the team too.
Yeah, well, when you take great talent like that, you bring them to an organization like yours and you expose them to the hundreds and hundreds of businesses that are part of the organization. I know that retention may be a little bit difficult. Let's talk about your focus, your strategic plan. 2017, 4 main areas: grow and diversify the Baton Rouge area economy, cultivate the region's talent, transform the Baton Rouge area's quality of life, and elevate the region's external image. Let's talk about each one of those, kind of what you're doing and where you're headed.
Sure, yeah. So we looked 2015, we started executing this in 2016, at regions like the Baton Rouge area. And around the country, you could think of places like Raleigh-Durham or Austin or Nashville. We also looked at places smaller like Columbia, South Carolina, Mobile, and wanted to emulate some of the things that we've seen as practices of excellence, but also to understand what's driving growth. And those four things you just said, by and large, are going to be the key factors for our region's sustainable long-term job growth and economic growth. It starts with a goal to try to continue to grow and diversify the economy, take what has been a skill area of ours in manufacturing and construction, but parlay that into growth segments as well around software, around healthcare, around coastal engineering and science. We see a lot of opportunities to see those changes and shifts in the economy while continuing to make sure our core economies are doing well.
Let's talk about that one before we move on, because this whole idea of the economic development work that you do is critically important. And you guys have really been the leader, working with LED, working with other local chambers and economic development organizations, but you have been the front line of going out there and attracting investment and jobs, and you've had some success.
We have. Well, I mean, fortunately, we set goals for ourselves every year. We have a kind of a strategy of building a pipeline of deal flow that could take 2-3 years sometimes to close. We've got one we hope to see closed this year that's been looking at us for 4 years. Takes a long time sometimes. So when we are doing that, we're constantly trying to make sure there's a lot of activity that we can go after. And some, you don't win them all. I mean, we've had some losses that sting in the past, and you learn from them, you try to get better. But the practice is one that you're constantly doing to try to make sure you've got a pipeline of activity. Just like any company that's thinking about their deal, deal generation and lead generation. So a lot of the lessons we learn when we lose deals parlay into other areas of the work that we do too. And I want to say the issue of how you think about talent and quality of life that you mentioned after diversifying the economy have as much to do with attracting companies as anything, and that we have seen in other places that when you're attracting talent and producing talent, retaining talent as a region, you're more likely to be competitive for projects. And we've seen projects we've lost sight. We have concerns about the pipeline of talent as probably the reason why we might look at this other market. Or they might come in and say, we see a lot of the things we like, but we want to know more about the quality of the education system and the challenges you'll have around traffic. And so those are issues that drive us to try to shape the community. The fourth issue about external image has a lot to do with how folks perceive you. And unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about how folks perceive the Baton Rouge area. We kind of went into this with a realization that we need to first get some data on this issue, study it nationally, and then start putting out in a national context stories that kind of elevate or change the conversation about the Baton Rouge area. And that's something that we think will drive ultimately talent attraction and deal flow.
Both of those are critically important, obviously. You have to have the talented workforce to be able to assume the positions that are necessary as those investments and those new jobs are created. But I'm really intrigued and in fact engaged with this whole quality of life and external perception. We got about a minute and a half left here. Let's talk a little bit about quality of place, this effort that we're working on together, where we're trying to improve in a lot of ways the aesthetics of how our community looks and how it looks compared to a lot of other places with which we might compete. Talk about that.
We had a speaker while we were doing our planning say, I've never seen so many good people working so hard at mediocrity. And talk about just stab you in the chest as a comment. But it's honest and true, and the realization is if you want to try to compete for talent and companies, to retain folks in your community who travel and see places around the South or around the world, and those communities are just prettier, cleaner, better maintained, it reflects an attitude. And that is the challenge we want to make sure we tackle, which is to make sure that the community's visual appeal is respectful, but is also attracting talent, retaining talent in the community.
It looks like our new mayor, whom we'll talk about her in just a few minutes in the next segment, is really bought into that as well. Lee Jenkins, who is the current board chair for performance contractors for BRAC, obviously heavily engaged in that effort. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about your conversations with the new mayor and what your expectations around her administration might be. We're visiting with Adam Knapp. He's the president and CEO of BRAC. and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together. Good times or bad, and oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors, they're my customers, they're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value. What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools, and that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Adam Knapp of BRAC is our guest. Ask you this when you were on the radio show a couple of weeks ago. New mayor, Sharon Weston Broome, new administration here in place in East Baton Rouge. Tell us about your conversations with the new mayor. Sort of what are your expectations? What have you asked her to focus on?
Sure.
You know, where are we headed?
Well, Tim, we kind of leading into this administration, our organization wanted to have a mayoral agenda for priorities. We had just rolled out this new strategic plan I spoke about a moment ago. And so we kind of crafted a mayoral agenda to ask the mayor to focus on key things. Some of the ones that we see in our strategic plan that can't be led by anybody else but a mayor is to continue to be very active in the world of economic development, continue to pursue the types of projects we've been fortunate to see come here, but it takes a very active and engaged mayor to get there. Second, things around transportation issues, I know we're going to get into a little bit more in a moment, but a mayor has a very strong obligation around prioritizing, especially arterial infrastructure and multimodal access to transit and other options. So those are key things a mayor has to lead on. We spoke to those issues. We spoke about community appearance issues and concerns around that. We also talked about focusing on education as a pipeline of talent into the system, and a mayor hopefully that would be very engaged in the education realm, very engaging with the superintendents in our community, and not sitting idly aside, but actually actively talking about the importance of those things.
I know one of the things, Adam, that you're working on very closely with the mayor, and this whole idea of economic inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. How can we take some of the more depressed areas of our community economically and raise them up? BRAC's been very focused on that, been very engaged. You recently had this economic boot camp that you've talked about.
Sure.
Give us a little bit more of an idea of the things you're working on from that perspective.
So in working with the mayor's office, we've had a lot of conversations around economic development in North Baton Rouge, and more broadly in underserved areas, economically underserved areas. And what can be done, what can our organization do, what can others do? We've highlighted a handful of things. One is the importance of restarting the East Baton Rouge Redevelopment Authority in a financially sound way. That is a kind of a systemic organization that can go in and be a catalyst for market investment into underserved areas. It's a national best practice for how to do this. The second thing we've talked about is how to engage entrepreneurs and small businesses with opportunities to expand or to start. What we just did last week was to host, brought in a group from Baltimore and hosted a entrepreneurial boot camp. 10 companies spent the day with an expert from out of state, a team of experts from out of state, about how to create businesses that can create value, both to the bottom line, but also to the community. The winner, Louisiana Healthcare Institute, got a $10,000 grant toward their certification of their company, which works in healthcare workforce training. We expect them to get national certification. That's going to drive their future growth. But it was also a way to understand how they're embedded in the community and what are their community roles they're playing. Those are the kinds of things that we see as ways to create on-the-ground entrepreneurial activity or small business activity in the community that can drive reinvestment and access. And really, economic opportunity has a lot to do with ways that the community can support and drive change and improvement. The third thing that has been happening, and the mayor has been involved, the administration at the state level has been involved, is making additional investments in workforce and workforce infrastructure. We have a strong economy, and making sure that folks who are in our economy, in our community, have access to the benefits of that economy equally is something that's super important. And so to do that, the state and the local partners at Baton Rouge Community College have invested at Ardendale, set up an automotive training center that's really special, the McKay Automotive Training Center. Immediately adjacent to it, next year in mid-2018, there will be opening a new career technical high school that EBR Schools is opening. We've been helping to bring together a lot of the allies to get them focused on what are the career areas that should be in there, and students will be able to walk half a block over into the Automotive Training Center, so really you'll have all of those acting cooperatively. That is a huge step forward for workforce training, and it's right there in North Baton Rouge to be able to make sure that really all of the community, north, south, east, west, can take part in those programs.
I tell you that McKay Automotive Training Center is actually a world-class facility and is going to do great things. Let's shift gears a little bit because we've got about 2 minutes left in this segment. I want to hit on it. As we sit here and tape, we're a couple of days before the end of the regular legislative session for 2017. Been some discussion in the last few days that maybe some budget deals might be possible. The governor's called a preemptive, put a preemptive call out there for a special session in case that's needed at the end of this. We're not fixing our problems. We've got this $1.3 billion fiscal cliff that we face next year. What are your overall thoughts on what the legislature's accomplished, or maybe its lack of accomplishment?
The fascinating thing was that experts spent a year looking at options for a consensus plan that could bring together the left and right. And really that got stymied as much as anything day one. I mean, even before the legislative session started, the conversation turned by the administration to look at a completely different option. And that, I think, set us back, frankly. And that challenge of not looking at what experts had recommended, but starting from scratch with an idea that
corporate activity tax
just confused the entire discussion. It's not to say that the proposal was getting any legs that was coming from the committee that spent a year working on it. But the idea that you would just cast it aside and not look at any of its pieces and work instead on something brand new was mind-boggling. So I think in many ways our reflection on all that is we've just spent an enormous amount of time on the wrong things, and rather than trying to work back towards some sort of grand bargain or consensus solution that moves us to some sort of systemic tax reform that everybody can be in that conversation and try to get some win around.
We've had 15 mid-year budget deficits in the last 9 years. We continue to face these situations without structural, real reform. One of the areas we need some structural, real reform in as well is infrastructure development and maintenance. I want to talk about that when we come back from the break.
I hope you do.
We're visiting with Adam Knapp. He's the president and CEO of BRAC, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them? And that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show, visiting with Adam Knapp, President and CEO of BRAC. A couple other things in terms of the legislative session and what's going on in our state, incentives, economic development, other things. Hit on those.
Yes, so the session was also interesting for a kind of an additional conversation happening around incentives and policy for Louisiana competitiveness. Four things to highlight. One is the state needed to extend its research and development tax credit program and to make some improvements that add more access for small businesses. Fortunately, that's gotten now through the full legislative session. It's heading to the governor for signature, we hope. A program that's going to actually help universities who are commercializing technology quite a bit. The second is a program around angel investors, a recognition that early stage companies need access to dollars to help them get rolling, and angel investors are a key way to do that. There's an incentive that motivates high net worth folks to invest in Louisiana into entrepreneurial ventures. That got an extension as well. And then the third is the Quality Jobs Program, an incentive that was created or revised under Mike Foster's term.
Sort of been a staple in the state, right?
It's probably our most important kind of base incentive that we use. That is an incentive to companies that create high quality jobs with benefits. That program not only got extended, which was critical on its sunset date, it would have terminated otherwise, but also made some modifications where it increased the wage levels to continue to push for higher wage jobs in order to earn those benefits. So those were three ones that were really important that have gotten through the process. There's a bill that failed, and unfortunate that it did, that would have helped local communities have a tool that was how do you work with property taxes at a local level for incentives. We use acronyms too much. This one was called PILOT.
Right, payment in lieu of tax, right?
Payment in lieu of taxes. And Cameron Parish, their school system made a very impassioned plea to need to have a tool that they could use to see immediate revenues from some of the major investments heading down into Cameron Parish. It would have been a tool for every parish to be able to use in directly negotiating with companies in a more creative way. It unfortunately failed to get through the process. And that failure is going to be a sting that's going to hurt Louisiana for a number of years to come. So we hope that there will be ways around that in the future.
Maybe we can bring it back and take another bite at the apple, as they say. Let's talk about infrastructure. So we face about a $13.1 billion backlog of needed maintenance on the existing structures that we have. We've got this mega project list of things we need for congestion relief that ranges anywhere from $12 to $15 billion. Transportation Task Force came out with a study that said we needed somewhere between $500 and $700 million additional annual revenue. Representative Steve Carter had a gas tax bill that would have raised our state gas tax by 17 cents. It failed without really ever getting a vote in the House of Representatives. So I ask you this question: where are we? Where are we headed? What happened? And if not this, what is the plan of those who killed that bill?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the bill probably had around 60 votes on the floor for the House of Representatives. Fortunately, it was able to get out of the Committee of House Ways and Means, found a consensus of leaders who recognized the importance of having this debate and got that bill to the floor. But 60, as you know, is 10 votes shy of 70 needed to get a two-thirds vote to get out of the House. And so that's where it died. And Representative Steve Carter, I respect his integrity on this. He said, I don't want to make folks have a symbolic vote that probably does harm to them, but also does harm to the movement of trying to do something at a future date. So what happens now is we have to decide whether there is any way that the state has a way to fund transportation. For right now, I think we're all scratching our heads about why opponents would have stopped something like this. Because
there was broad support, business community, business organizations, lobby.
Sort of.
Well, sort of. But I mean, organizations that don't typically work together, from different sides of the aisle here, came together and said, we support this.
Our organization, One Acadiana in Lafayette, Greater New Orleans, Inc., all of the regional organizations that run economic development work around the state led on this early. And we said, this can't be coming from the folks in the construction industry that benefit from building roads. It really needs to come from those of us who see the challenges of infrastructure to driving our economy. And when you have 35 business organizations, grassroots, local chambers of commerce across the state, every corner of the state, saying this was a priority. From the North Shore to North Louisiana, folks were saying this was something that had to happen this year. So to have a bill get that far, 60 votes, a blend of Republicans and Democrats saying this was a crisis and we needed to take action, to fail is mind-boggling. And it was really the only time when you've seen business come out in favor of a tax where we say we have absolute benefit for the state, economic return for the state, when we can get our infrastructure improved. And so now, for the capital region, let me just kind of bring this very much to home and then talk about the state. We have to scratch our heads and say, is there any way the state is useful? Because the legislature is clearly useless on this topic. And I hate to be blunt about it, but I think our view of what they've left us with is a mess. And at a regional level, every part of the state is now sent back home to say, well, if they're useless on this, if the Republican leadership in the House do not have a plan for how to fix the state's infrastructure needs, it leaves us at a community and regional level to say, well, the state isn't going to be there to help. What can communities do to solve their problems? And unfortunately, there are not many good options. The Constitution prohibits gas taxes being levied at a local or regional level, so that's off the table. You have left what we have as a state problem, which is very little that the state grants local communities as means by which they can fund things. And so there's a lot of challenges that we face going forward. And so we're now trying to begin the planning about what else, if not that.
I want to have you back on sometime soon and spend more time talking about those specific solutions that we might develop as a result of this. Adam Knapp.
Great to be on.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.